Hi, I'm Deb Crow, and welcome to Season 2 of the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. This is a podcast where we connect, learn, and laugh together with strong leaders from all over the globe. Here, you will learn from peers you haven't even met yet. You will gain new tools to add to your leadership toolbox. Because whether you're a C-suite executive or a first-time entrepreneur, we all contend with challenges, and there's always room for improvement if we choose to seek it. So please pull up a chair and listen in. This is the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. Welcome back. This is Deb Crow from Imperfect, the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. And I'm with David Brier. LinkedIn, you know, it's our professional playground. And I have to tell you, I meet the coolest, most amazing heart-centered leaders. So before I get into this thought-provoking, brilliant conversation, which we'll call an interview, but it's really just going to be an awesome conversation. Please let me give some foreground to this amazing. Can I call you my friend? Because I feel like we're friends already.
Absolutely.
We're colleagues and friends, and I'm sure by the end of this interview, you'll have a word for that. So David Brier, branding specialist, rebranding expert. I just want to call you like the forefather of wordsmithing. Like when I listen to your voice, whether it's something on LinkedIn or you're doing a podcast, you have such a passion for the use of the English language and how you describe things. Makes me really want to have some fun with our questions today. I know that you are a huge contributor to Fast Company. You're doing all kinds of fun stuff with Cher Jones and Andy Foote over on Clubhouse. You just have a consistent presence. So what I love about you the most in getting to know you is you practice what you preach. And I don't want to say it in this framework, but when you're trying to sell branding, you really bring to life what you're trying to teach all of us. And that's what I love the most about you. I love your authenticity, and you are a heart-centered leader. So welcome to the show, David Brier.
Well, thank you. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to live up to that introduction, but you know what? Let's bring it on.
Let's bring it on.
Let's pop the cork of this champagne.
Let's do it. Okay, first leadership question, because there's always a story, right?
Yeah.
When I was researching you, and also I had a vacation 2 weeks ago. What did I do on my vacation? I read your book. I read it in an afternoon. And then I wanted to give you a review to really embrace your brilliance of words. And I thought, I need to tell him where he brought me. I felt like I walked into a hotel and you were like the concierge saying, Deb, where do you want to go? And then I sat down to have this meal, and over you came as the sommelier with the wine list. And it was like, let me take you on the tour of branding. And I said that to you. I said, I couldn't put your book down. Like, what a great feedback to have from someone reading your book. But I love the layout. I love the big font. I wear trifocals. Like, I loved it. So here's my first question. That was a really big workup to that, but I needed to share that with you. Mm-hmm. There's always a story. So share with us where your love of branding came from and how it's really affected both your personal and your professional life.
Cool. Well, I mean, so the first thing is for those of you that are, and those, by the way, those of you that are listening to this in your car or while working out or something like that, I invite you to check out the actual, wherever Deb is going to be posting this, because then you'll get to see the painting I'm pointing to. Like that painting, that's a painting of George Harrison. I did that when I was 14 years old. So my whole life, I've loved art. I've loved creation. I've loved creativity. The aspect of branding started to the beginning of that the crack in that, opportunity for me was in my last semester of college. I saw, because I was an art major and I'm studying illustration and art and different things and I'm planning on being an illustrator. I figured, well, how am I going to convert the idea, like, unless you were dead, Painters didn't, that was my idea. And unless you were dead, painters didn't make money, right? Illustrators, though, those are the ones that were commercial artists, quote unquote. And so that is how everyone made money. So I was planning that, but I saw this particular publication. It was a publication that I'd never seen before because it was something for the industry of design and typography, the art and craft of letters and using letters and design and logos and stuff like that. And I had never seen a publication like this. I was like, oh my God. I saw a level of craft that married words with shape, with form, with turning a piece of paper that would normally in a regular magazine just be just paragraph after paragraph, just crap, accompanied by ads and stuff like that. The normal stuff that we commonly see in publications. This was like, oh my God, this was craftsmanship and genius in action, respecting imagery, color, shape, form, concept, ideas. And that was where I got the bug for what was possible. And that was probably the turning point. And then for me, it became much more comprehensive because I've used the principles that I have developed with regard to branding. I've used them for everything from helping others to delivering keynotes, to delivering webinars, to raising tens of millions of dollars for humanitarian efforts that I support. And so it's not a one-dimensional thing. It's not like, oh, okay, I go to work and I do something that's, two-dimensional on a piece of paper or blah, 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 or on my screen. So that's a little bit of a comprehensive answer to give you an idea of that.
It's like this menu of creativity for you that's limitless, because every week I'm looking and you're animated, or you're on a building, or you're purple, and there's humor, and I never know what words are going to be married with it, but I'm always looking forward to the next.
Which is great. I mean, see to me, that's what I love. I mean,
Yeah.
If I can do that, I'm doing my job to give you a level of expectation that you're kind of like, ooh, what surprises are going to be today?
Yeah. What's Dave up to this week?
You got it. And I think, the greatest brands, the greatest leaders, the greatest artists, the greatest products, those things have an element of that too. It's like, ooh, you gave me something that was not all predictable and according to the script.
Yeah. And I mean, it's an excitement as an entrepreneur and a business owner, but I think when you can give that element of surprise to an existing client, a potential client, I think we look for that. I think it's part of a shopping experience, if you will. And since we're all online and have been.
Totally.
It's
like, I'll often compare things to just ordinary life circumstance. I mean, I compare it to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant, even if they make the most amazing, whatever it is, let's say whether it's a steak thing or whether it's a vegetarian thing or whether it's a pizza thing or whatever, and it's just great, but it's the same every time. You're going to reach a threshold of like, I'd like to try something different. Even if it's great, even if it's brilliantly done, it's like, is there an element of, oh, wow, they did this time. That was cool. And I talk about that in the book, known and unknown. That the known is what we know. The unknown is the discovery. That's like, ooh, what you got now?
Well, and I think an element of surprise in our lives, especially right now, is welcomed with open arms. Okay, the only question that all of my guests get is the one that I think embodies the name of the podcast. I believe that we're all imperfect human beings. So share with us, what imperfections do you bring to your heart-centered leadership?
I would say it might be considered an imperfection for those that like very formulaic, procedural, like, okay, every time we do blank, blank, blank. Like I was just working with one of my colleagues on a project for a client, and he goes, David, how come we're not doing the usual? We have a certain framework that we actually structure stuff with regard to. I said, I don't know. I haven't put my finger on exactly why. And I'm happy to go there, but let's just kind of riff on this a little bit. Let's just toss some things back and forth and back. So it's the factor that I can really embrace a very fluid and a very shifting framework to get the job done, because I'm never hazy about what the finish line is. How we get there could shift, and so that might be not exactly the most tolerable way for people who like very regimented ways of going about things. So that's the thing that I do. Like my wife is brilliant. She's more systematic in how things get done. I'm without question, I'm so much less systematic, but I'm very exacting, but I'm less systematic. And so we both have the same goal, and that's why we get on so well. We both have a good sense of humor, and we both, et cetera, et cetera. But we have different ways that we approach it. And so in that way, that's the kind of thing that's interesting, and it can.
And you know what I love about that is, in the leadership world, there's actually a term for it, and it's called intuition management. So we have systematic leaders, and then we have leaders that sometimes go, okay, I'm anchored on the vision. I've shared my vision with you, and I normally would do A, B, and C to get there. But sometimes, and I did a post about this today, we have to have our brain and our heart and our gut all aligned. And sometimes it's not. And I think it's so interesting that you said, I haven't taken my eye off the prize. I know what the end vision is, but sometimes we need to go take a detour, or we're going to jump over here and then come back. And I don't know why, but you're going with your gut. And I think that's part of feeding our creative self. And I love that.
Yeah. And the outcome, I mean, I these days I have to watch when I'm sharing certain things, because sometimes I'll actually do a Zoom presentation, and other times I'm like, okay, I have to share this with you, and with this one I could tell she was going to be fine, but but I shared it with her, and she was like, oh my God, she her mind was blown. But similarly, 2.5 weeks ago, I was called up a client, and I said, hey, here, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you exactly where your brand is, and what's your story, and what's your this, and the new name, and this, that, the other. I said, but it sounds like you're driving. He goes, I am. I said, and this was right after Tiger Woods had driven off that cliff. And so I said, we're not going to have a Tiger Woods moment, dude. I said, I know if I read this to you, your mind would be blown. You'd ride right off the road. I said, so you let me know when you get back to the office. He goes, oh, I said, dude, trust me. I trust my judgment on this. I'm not going to have you drive off the road, because you were so blown out about what we're going to be talking about. And he goes, good call, after I told him later.
That's awesome. And your clients, and that's also part of the creative process, right? Is getting to know who we're working with. I love that. Okay, third question. What leadership qualities do you bring to your leadership to maintain your branding as a branding expert? How's that for a question?
That's a wild question. Ask me that again.
What leadership qualities do you bring to your leadership, so the leadership of your company, to maintain being a branding expert? What's in your toolkit every day that's non-negotiable, that has to be there so that people see and view you continually and sustainably as a branding expert?
Lack of complacency and lack of laziness.
See, you didn't even have to think about it.
I mean, complacency is a life suck. It absolutely, it's like, oh, we're great, we're fine, we're cool, we're this, we're that, and laziness is like, to me, is autopilot. And so lazy doesn't mean, oh, I don't want to exert the energy. No, lazy means you're going on autopilot. It means you're just going through the motions. You're not injecting new life into it, newly fresh right now, every day. Because the bottom line is we're all one moment away from being out of work, or losing a client, or having the economy go crazy, or having a pandemic, right? So why would I allow laziness, because if I'm not lazy with my observation, and I'm not lazy with my inspection of things, and not lazy with my ability to extrapolate, and not lazy in failing to ask why or why not. See, to me, so just doing those things are factors of not being lazy. And by doing that, I can stay ahead of the curve enough so that way I don't get thrown off by the things that are beyond my control. And I think that's what I bring.
Well, and that laziness and getting complacent, I think, is just a cousin to being procrastinating. And we have to show up every day with it's non-negotiable consistency.
But procrastination is a different factor that has to do with putting things off and time. Laziness is like, okay, at least the laziness that I'm specifying here has to do with I'm showing up, but I'm only going 20% in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, it's almost like a pretense. It's like, well, why? Why are you wasting your time and my time?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you going to show up at 20%? Why are you going to show up at 40%? Why are you going to show up at 60 or 70%? Why are you not going to be here 180, like right now, and then right now again, and right now again? And that's the push that I put on myself and others, because it's the winning way. Mm-hmm. Not just from a compulsive have to, but just like it's the winning way. Every great athlete, every great leader, every great inspired author, writer, actor, what did they do? They all had this one trait that they all shared, and that trait was they knew they needed to be their worst enemy. They needed to be their greatest threat to their achievement. Okay, I've achieved this today. I've scored 75 points. Tomorrow I need to score 80. Because what did they know? If they didn't, someone else was going to. Mm-hmm. And it was something that I read and loved in Steve Jobs' book, where it was like once they completed the iPad, they finally got the iPad. It was like they got it nailed. His next question was, "This is excellent, good. Now show me iPad 2 and iPad 3." Because if you're not willing to expire your own greatness and or that you hold in the world, someone's going to expire it for you. So be your own worst enemy. That's the greatest way to stay ahead. I
love that. I threw that little procrastination comment because I knew you were going to unpack it. Okay, last leadership question. If you could give our listeners one nugget of wisdom to help them be better leaders in regard to branding their business, what's one simple little nugget of wisdom you could drop for us today?
The most important person in the room is the other person, not you.
Can you say that again, please?
The most important person in the room is the other person, not you. Not that I'm saying this to your listeners. The most important person in the room is that other person that you are talking to, not yourself. And so, and even if you're there to help, I mean, it's the thing that I go over, even in I go over, it's one of the first things I go over, just even in the masterclass part, where I'm essentially mentoring and educating, 15, 20, or 25 entrepreneurs from around the world. I'm saying, here's the deal. The most important person here, and I tell every one of them, is you. It's not me because you're taking my class. Mm-hmm. No, it's like I'm here simply to facilitate. And the bottom line is, and I tell them, I marry it with this other concept of it. And I say, look, here's the bottom line. You don't need a brand. I know you're taking this, and that's rather shocking for them to go, wait a second, I just signed up for the Brand Intervention Masterclass. Yeah, you don't, but I say, no, you don't need a brand. Your brand needs you. And my job is to help give you back you so that you can empower your brand. And they're like, gives them a whole new viewpoint. But that's the thing. And if you really can get behind that, and that was a tough one for me to learn, because coming from an artistic background, I thought everything had to do with my artistic talent. I thought that was the thing, the metric that determined my value of who would hire me, who would want to hire me for my talents, my skills, and da 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 da. And so it was always like, well, me, right? Well, me, right? Well, me. And it was at a certain point, it's like, wait a second, where is it? Had to flesh out, because your days are numbered when you have that structure.
Oh, and there's lots of parallel conversations we could have off that. So isn't that an interesting wisdom of nugget? But I mean, it goes to anything: leadership, marketing, managing, heart-centered leadership. Okay, we're going to move into the Fab Four. We want to know what's sitting on that creative, cappuccino drinking, brilliant mind of yours. Tell us something that we don't know about David Brier.
That I was intrigued with the opposite sex, even when I was a young little lad, at about 4 or 5 years old. I was like, oh, kind of cute, interesting. I'm gonna investigate this. I found girls interesting. so it was a conversation that my wife and I had recently had. She goes, "You're interested in girls that young?" And I was like, "Yep."
I love it. That's so sweet. And there's a Mrs. Brier. So there you go. It worked out for you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Second question. If you could have dinner with anyone, whether it be someone who's famous or that you would view as a leader, either living or who's passed away, who would it be and why would you want to have dinner with them? What would the conversation be?
Wow. Oof. A few came to mind. Do I have to choose just one?
Whatever's on your heart is what you can share.
Okay.
Tell us who the three are. I'd like to hear who they are. 3.
So 1, Steve Jobs.
Mm.
I'd really just love to, not Steve Jobs, seeing that, not the Steve Jobs icon, but just like hanging, chilling. It's like a real heart to heart with Steve. Steve, the individual who was driven. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we got glimpses of that, and not again, not Steve Jobs, the amazing sales presenter that with the presentations, which were brilliant, but that relentless passion, that the artist, Steve Jobs, the artist. That's what I'd love to have that conversation. I would love to have had a heart to heart with Martin Luther King, one of the most brilliant orators ever, an incredible viewpoint, incredible humanity. And I'd love to have sat down and just spoken, broken bread, talked. That just would have been interesting. Just again, heart to heart. And then lastly, someone that, unless you have people who have been in the design business for a while, the person who actually influenced me to move, had the impact for me to make that change of decision going from illustrator to designer. His name is Herb Lubalin. I had an interview with him once, and he was, if you saw his work commanded, you could not walk into a room with his work and not just stop in your tracks and just stare at it. It had that much impact and meaning and power. But socially, he was quiet, not awkward, just didn't say very much, which was like a 180-degree dichotomy. And I had this interview with him, and there were some people who said, "Oh, you have an interview with Herb." Okay. If they said, if he stops on a page and or clears his throat, that is the highest compliment that you can get. And so it was interesting from that standpoint of, and I got one of those. I'm proud to say I got one of those in my interview. But when you put him in front of a room, in a podium, oh my God, the brightest mind in the room would get you to look and think. And to me, the greatest value of those of us, the greatest value we bring is to encourage and inspire people to look for themselves, to inspect things for themselves. I don't want people to think like me. I don't want people to If I inspire them, if I light up the spark, great. But you don't need to try to be like me. You don't need to try and do what I've done. Like, what are you going to do? What like, just make me envious. Like, wow, I didn't see that coming. That was amazing. Right. That's the magic.
Well, and just awakening that self-awareness for people is such a gift, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah, and it's neat that you had three right on top of mind that, if it was at all possible, you'd sit and have a conversation. But I love the way you described kind of your mentor, different guy in a one-to-one conversation versus watching him lecture. And we can say that about a lot of people. And it's so impactful how they have different modes of communication and can affect us with different levels of emotion. So that's powerful.
Yeah.
So cool. Okay, third question. What advice would you give to a new business owner who think they need branding to get started and put a shingle up to say they're in business? Because I'm sure you get asked that a lot.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd say from the standpoint of getting seen and heard in the world, they're right. They do need a brand, but do not use that or mistake that for being something in place of you. It's not lipstick. It's not like, oh, here's the brand. If there's a big gap between you and that brand, you being the entrepreneur, or you being the CEO, or you being the thought leader in that space or for that industry or for that company, don't lessen that. I am known for threatening people with great passion when they actually make less of themselves, because I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a minute. You bring that crap into my world. I
want to throw in another question here, because I think it's got a lot of merit.
Yeah.
Because you've worked with a lot of big brands, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's certain brands that we just know and we love, and they evoke emotion in us. So talk about maybe one of your favorite accounts. I know they're all your favorite, but what's one that you really threw yourself in, and kind of like you talked about earlier, you knew what the end result was, but maybe you took a little detour to get there, and your vision landed up being a little bit different for that account. Like, I think there's merit in that story, so that people can see how relatable you are. And you're not new in business, but you still go through those thought processes.
Totally. So you want.
Let's talk about Estee Lauder, because I love perfume, and you often use it in your branding and your purple beautiful bottles.
See, what's very interesting though is that I mean, that was early in my career. I mean, actually, I'm going to use a different one. I'm going to use New York City Ballet.
Okay.
New York City Ballet was a something that I was really feeling out my skill sets for conveying a concept and capturing this and capturing that. And what I found was that was one where I really brought all of the components, and people loved that. And I guess the thing that was the most successful thing for me, I remember hearing from some Asian people who had looked at it, and they couldn't read any of the English characters, but because of the design, they knew exactly. They knew it was New York City Ballet, and that to me was kind of like the little magical ooh. We actually have something that can kind of transcend language itself. Language is a
barriers,
tool.
Right?
Well, yeah. Well, language is a tool. Language can be used as a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole thing is if what we're doing is not amplifying and elevating those things, such as language and color and meaning and ideas and stories, then we're thinking, it's kind of like this. There was an art tour. There was a tour that I participated in, I don't know, a little over a decade ago, and you see a little bit of the art here, and you see the art on the walls. So there's a lot, and there's gazillions of stuff over here. But the basic thing is that I created this art series, and this person asked me, and oh man, I just had to prevent myself from jumping down their throat because they said, oh, so you do this stuff on computer. What programs do you use? I was ready to kill them, right? Because I'm seeing where they're going. They're like, oh, if I have the programs, I can now do this. No, you can't. So I said to her, and I looked at her as kindly as I could, and I said, I said, to me, the programs don't do anything. They happen to be the tool, the vehicle. And I said, and I pulled out a pencil. I had a little pencil at the time. I pulled out a pencil and I said, you know what? In my viewpoint, this pencil, this was the first computer. Here, try something.
Yeah.
And I said to him, and I closed it out with just saying this. I said, look, the microphone didn't make the Beatles sound good. The Beatles made the microphone sound good.
Right.
I left it at that.
Yeah. And there's so many cliches. It's like, when Microsoft came out with Windows and everybody panicked, and it was like, the keyboard still has a function. The mouse is just its new cousin involved, but you can still, it's funny you say that. When I used to teach introduction to Windows classes at our local college, and on the last class, I unplugged all the mice. And they're all looking at me like, what is she doing? And I said, someday there's going to be a morning where you come into work early to finish something for your boss. And you're going to go move that mouse and it's not going to work. And there's no IT guy to call because you came in early. Guess what? The keyboard was the predecessor to the mouse. And I want you to learn how to get around in Windows without the mouse. I can't even tell you how many of them, and this is before email really got taken off. They were like, it happened. And I didn't panic because you taught me. But when they first came in and they're all looking for the mouse, and I thought I wanted to teach them for something that was going to be situational. So
perfect.
Cool.
Perfect.
Okay. My last question. This is the one I can't wait to hear.
Yeah.
What do you want your legacy to be?
For me, my legacy would be that my work and the places that I chose to apply my talents helped pave a way for people to think for themselves, to be independent, to not mistake the finish line, or not mistake a starting line for a finish line. And if that were to happen, then people would actually be more brilliant, be more ingenious, rise up to what they're capable of achieving. That's what matters to me. I love to the ends of the earth the look on people's faces when they discover what's possible. And it is just the most rewarding thing in the world to me. And so that is what's exciting. The least exciting part is, and I stopped doing this years ago, is like when occasionally I would take on a client that who was exceedingly selfish. They're basically exceedingly just the bad version of capitalism, where it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to make more money so that there's more commas and period and zeros in my bank account. No, if you're not putting that and rechanneling that to do other things, to make other things possible and doing various things, that's very, very futile and very, very lonely. So that's what I love, is I love that reciprocal component and that discovery. And I love people being able to think for themselves, that not look for yourself, conclude for yourself, think for yourself, and just have that freedom, have that I call it that have the limberness of mental Pilates.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I shared with you that I had a staycation, because nobody's going anywhere right now. And I read your book, and it's not too often that I can read someone's book and hear their voice. and I could hear your voice. And I don't know if it's, well, I do know now that I've talked to you. You were methodical in the color scheme and the font and the size and how you did the pagination and all of that. And it's kind of like when Netflix ends an episode and you look at your spouse and go, okay, we're going to stay up just to watch this one. And of course, they leave you on a cliffhanger. So what do you do on a weeknight? You stay up later. And then the next thing, it's 2:00 in the morning and you're like, this is ridiculous. And I always say, well done, writers. That's why I read the book in the afternoon, because
Right.
I could hear you and it was like, okay. And it was like you were putting all of these cognitive points together for me. It was like this mental Pilates puzzle. So it was really well done. And I could see your passion and I see it in all that you do. I could listen to your voice all day, seriously. And I think that you're such a gift to the branding world, because it's like anything else. There's people that do it well, people that do it okay, and people that really should be in another job. But that's a whole other podcast. So I just want to commend you, because I really do love what you represent, and you do ignite and exude that heart-centered quality, because when our clients do well, it makes us know that we're still evolving as human beings as well. And it's never about us. It doesn't matter what sector you're in. We're all in the people business. So I just wanted to give you a virtual high five and just say much admiration from here. And I love all of your work. We're going to put all of David's information below in the podcast episode description. I know he's got a spring masterclass coming up that I'm even going to consider jumping into. I think if we stop learning and growing, as a yoga teacher, I always say we have to continue to be, but that doesn't mean that we stop growing, learning, and listening.
Exactly. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank
David,
you. That's very, very wonderful. And thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that very much.
well, thank you for taking the time to be on Imperfect. It was fun learning a little bit more about you, and we look forward to putting our interview out on the waves of the internet. And thank you for what you bring to the branding world.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Deb.
My pleasure. If you like the show, give us a rating and a review. Make sure you go to David's website. He's got an amazing amount of information that he puts out there. Even if you're looking to get started, he's got a downloadable ebook. I highly recommend his book. You can read it in an afternoon, because I did it. So this is Deb Crow. Thank you once again for joining me on Imperfect, the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. Until next time.
You've been listening to the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. I'm Deb Crow. If you like what you heard today, please rate and review the show. And I'd love it if you'd visit my website at debcrow.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter and get access to the Heart-Centered Leadership Toolkit, all free of charge. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you again.